Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the negative impacts that excessive gaming has on adolescents. So the first game was created in 1958, and it was a two-player tennis game that was called Tennis for Two. It only had 2 lines and 1 dot along the screen, and the players had to keep score themselves. So, of course, we know that gaming has increased significantly in both popularity and technological advances, graphics, and which has contributed to how many people play it. And we also know that most of the people that play it start when they are teenagers or younger. So, what are these negative impacts? Well, there have been a multitude of studies that show that excessive gaming will be bad for teenagers. So according to a Frontiers in Psychology journal from 2015, 80% of teenagers play games at least once a day. So we know that this has a negative effect, of course, but this is also a very large amount of the adolescent population that is going to experience these negative effects. So, of course, playing games is not necessarily bad, but in excess, it can have many different effects, such as increased aggression, increased anxiety, depression, as well as other health effects. For example, obesity is something that it can contribute to. So then we look at how do we know when it becomes a real problem? Well, there have been 2 different terms going around in these studies and scientific journals that are PVGU and PUVG, which respectively mean pathologic video game use and problematic use of video games. So the pathologic video game use has to do with video game addiction, and it is similar to having a drug addiction in terms of people get the feeling of being high when they play video games, or they will experience withdrawal when they try to stop playing video games. And it can also cause problems in their interpersonal relationships. Problematic use of video games is more similarly related to something that is referred to as internet gaming disorder, which has recently been introduced into the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and it was added in the last decade. So, how do we prove that these things are real? How do we prove that this actually is having a negative effect? Well, the first model that we can look at is the general aggression model, which comes from a journal article from Clinical Child Psychology and Psychiatry, written by Milani. And what that has to do with inputs, routes, and outcomes. So the inputs are more personal to individuals, such as their traits, characteristics, and what they've experienced in their life. The routes are the actual video games and their violent content and what that does within their brain and their physical biology. And so then the result, of course, is the outcomes, which shows that excessive violent video games has an increased aggression in adolescents. Another model from the same journal is the dimensional model, which attempts to move past just the good versus bad of video games. And that one has 5 different structures that contribute to how aggression impacts adolescents. And that would be the amount of video games played, the content of the games, the context of the games, the structure and mechanics of the games that they're playing. So for example, the context of the game could have to do for like a social context, and if the players react negatively or positively to the content of the game. For structure, it would be quick responses would increase reactivity in adolescents, and so it would essentially teach them to react faster instead of taking the time and thinking about what they're doing. So in conclusion, we can see that an increase of aggression and anxiety, as well as other health problems in adolescents, is largely contributed from video games and violent content that they consume in excess. And this is very harmful, and we should just make sure that our teenagers have other hobbies and activities. Thank you.